An American man who owns a popular Wellington cafe says poor advice by National MP Chris Bishop may have cost him and his family the right to stay in New Zealand. Steve Jensen, who owns Java Point Cafe in Lower Hutt, was forced to leave New Zealand with his wife and 3 teenage children 2 Fridays ago after his application for residency was rejected for failing to meet GST targets. Now, as we'll hear, he didn't appeal. Mr Jensen says his local List MP Chris Bishop offered hope by saying he'd get the Associate Minister of Immigration Scott Simpson involved. We called Scott Simpson's office on Monday to ask if he'd made a final decision about the Jensens. We were told he had, but that decision would be conveyed to the Jensens by Mr Bishop, the National Party List MP based in the Hutt Valley. During the week, we contacted Mr Jensen to see if he'd heard from Mr Bishop. When they hadn't heard by Wednesday, we called Mr Bishop to ask why he hadn't told them. He didn't return our calls, so we called Steve Jensen today to see if he'd heard from Chris Bishop yet.
He called me about 12, a little after midnight one night, and told me that he had heard back from the minister and that the decision was negative, that the minister was not going to intervene. And there was a little moment of silence, and I told him that I just didn't understand why, and he said basically the minister has just made a decision to not intervene, and Chris will forward me the letter. So he did, and so then I stayed awake the rest of the night with my wife, and we mulled it over and talked, and I don't know. That's how we found out. It was a little unnerving. So
now I've got a copy of the letter to Chris Bishop from Scott Simpson, the Associate Minister of Immigration. And the third paragraph says to me, I note that the family's resident application was declined in March 2017, but they did not avail themselves of the opportunity to make an appeal to the Immigration and Protection Tribunal in relation to the declined decision. Why didn't you make an appeal?
That's a great question. We paid a lot of money. We went to 3 different immigration advisors, legal counsel, who all advised us, they'd been down the process, that based on the business immigration advisor, or the person who rejected us, she had every right to reject us on the grounds that she did. And therefore, there was little to zero benefit of going to a tribunal. They didn't have any grounds to overturn it. And in fact, we did call Chris, and the day that was our final day of appeal, we had 42 business days, or 42 calendar days, I think it was, to appeal from the original date, and just said, you're 100% sure, right, Chris? We're not supposed to appeal. And he goes, no, I wouldn't appeal. So we said, great. We'll go to the other route.
Forgive me for seeking clarification here, but Chris Bishop, who describes himself as the National List MP based in the Hutt Valley, and that's a statement of fact, he is a National List MP, and he's based in the Hutt Valley. So he was being a kind of advocate on your behalf, was he?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We met with Chris a few times, told him our situation. Chris informed us before we got the decision back, when we preliminary got the letter that said, basically in November of 2016, that said, we doubt that you're going to fulfill all the requirements, and she listed about 12 different items that we hadn't met, in her opinion, on. We at that point went to Chris and said, this is a huge letter, this is a big thing, we'll address these. And Chris said, well, you need to let it take the course that it needs to take. I'm not going to jump in or intervene right now. And that's what he told us. And so we wrote the letters, our attorney and I, and we addressed every item. And we felt that of the, say, 12 items there were, 11 of them, we met every criteria. There was one that we didn't meet, and that was we didn't raise enough GST. We didn't do the gross sales that we said we would do based on our business plan that was prepared for us by our immigration advisor 4 years ago. We didn't meet that. We got close. We hit a little over 75%, but we didn't hit the full 100% target, and we couldn't argue that. That's why they rejected us. Standalone reason, she said.
And when they rejected you on those grounds, you could have appealed. But did Chris Bishop advise you not to appeal?
He said, yes, he did say that he did not believe that it would be beneficial to appeal.
And did he say did he say to you that he would talk to the Associate Minister of Immigration on your behalf?
He did a number of times. He said he would go, and bat for us, and present to the minister. Originally, he said he would talk to Michael Woodhouse out of Otago, because that's who needs to make the decision. And then that changed about probably a week before we left New Zealand, where he said Michael Woodhouse doesn't make that decision. Scott Simpson will now make that decision. He's the associate. But yes, Chris did say that.
That's Steve Jensen talking to us earlier. We haven't heard back from National MP Chris Bishop. We've made a few calls and approaches to his office. He hasn't returned any of them. Meanwhile, the Jensen family really have no alternative now but to abandon their lives in Wellington Lower Hutt, sell up the cafe and their share in the building, and start again anew in America. It does look like their chances of becoming New Zealanders have formally and fully gone.